Start tonight's meeting with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I have one blue card, so I will read. The Board of Education has set aside this time for an opportunity for a community to address the board. To allow for public participation, a period not to exceed 30 minutes shall be set aside during, I know I need to do the agenda. Well, I'll read this first.
But I don't, is he going in open forum or the open public hearing?
Oh, that's right, too.
So I'll make a motion.
Yeah, if I could get a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Yeah, so,
Do we need a motion to open the public hearing? Okay.
yep, you can make the motion.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay. And I think Tom's going to start us off, right?
Yeah.
With the,
Well, it's just to open, this is the
Yeah,
opportunity for,
but Maureen, just come right down to the mic.
Oh, okay.
It's her spiel. She'll get up and say, is there anybody here that would like to?
So this is the required public hearing session. Oh, maybe I had to turn it on? Yeah. We're getting to the end. We have a total timeline that we have to follow when it comes to the budget vote and everything that leads up to it. Next Tuesday, the third Tuesday in May, is always the vote across New York State. And as you work back, the budget notice was due in the mail by May 13th, and it's out now with a big budget newsletter. And right at that point, between the 5th and the 12th, is the required public hearing, which is what this part is tonight. There's many New York State requirements, and they're kind of hard for people to understand all of them, so that's why we put out the newsletter to go along with it. All districts must present their budgets every year for approval. They're voted on third Tuesday in May. They all must be prepared in 3 categories: the program, the administrative, and the capital. A public hearing must be held, which is this. Board member vacancies must be filled by the voters. The Section 495 real tax property law needs to be put out there. But copies of the budget must be available to the public. The required budget notice must go out to the public, which is what's on the back of the newsletter. Everything must be mailed and done by May 13th. We must also have out a property tax report card, administrative salaries, and the district report card. All of that stuff is available on the back table, and it's also all available on the website. This is the district notice, the required district notice. It's very hard to understand, and it doesn't clearly give you the information that some people are looking for. Actually, Tom emailed me this weekend with the one from his district, and he's like, I don't understand, what's the tax levy increase? And I'm like, well, it doesn't actually say that. But that's the required format. So I tried to put some slides together that actually goes through it for everybody. We've had our budget revenues for the last 2 or 3 months and have been discussing them. As we know, our district is predominantly driven by state aid, and the rest of our money really comes from the tax levy, both items which are capped at certain amounts. So it doesn't leave us a lot of room to move. Our categories of expenditures, we look at them in, these are called object codes, which is what most people present and how we have to keep track of our numbers as far as filing ST3s and year-end reports. So the bulk of our money is spent on salary and the fringe benefits associated with them. We pay money to city BOCEs for various budget lines that are on the document. Our debt service is essentially our mortgage payments for our capital projects. And everything else, except for the utilities and fuel, is put into the other, which is actually one of the smaller percentages of our budget. But if you look at these total expenditures across the bottom, this is the required way the three categories that are supposed to be presented with the budget notice. It's the exact same totals on the bottom, it's just in a different set of categories. There's a lot less information in this way of presenting it than there is in ours, but that is the required three categories. Basically, 75% of our budget is program. 16% of it is capital, which includes the debt service and the custodial maintenance areas, and 9% of it is administrative. Those are the three percentages that are the required public notice. Our budget, our goals this year to close our deficits were to use district reserves and savings, increase the tax levy, it's going to be 2.99%, and decrease costs. The main goal is to keep programming in place. We are making no additions, and we're trying to maintain the progress that's been accomplished. Everything that we are trying to do as far as reductions go is driven by the declining enrollment, which is still estimated to decline based on live birth rates, is where this data comes from. This does not take into consideration anything potentially in the future to do with Micron. So the budget increase is 3.28%, the tax levy increase is 2.99%, and then we're using savings and reserves. If you look at the full budget document, in the red parts are the savings and reserves, and you can see they're highlighted, and those are give or take one-time pieces that we are putting in there. We've been doing that for a couple years now, which is slowly making our fund balance go down. Our expenditures, our revenues, just in a pie graph. As you can see, the state aid and the tax levy make up the bulk of our revenues. The tax levy is a three-piece puzzle. Your tax rate, that is what's on your bill when you get the bill, is made up of three parts. It takes the levy, which we assess. It incorporates the town assessments and the New York State equalization rate. We tax across 11 townships and 3 counties. So the rates are different on every township that we have. So basically, you take the levy as a total, that's the total amount that we can raise. It's going to be divided up in different pies based on the tax rates. And they're calculated by dividing the assessed value of the community adjusted by the state equalization rates.
Maureen, if I could just stop you for a second, because I know that there is a lot of community members that are currently getting tax assessments in the mail from their towns, and there's a lot of, talk online about the increases that people are experiencing. I just want to make clear, we have nothing to do with any of that,
No,
correct?
no, we only are the one piece. We put out the levy.
Hold on, a perfect example of that are the 2 straight years, not long ago, that we went out with a 0% tax levy increase, but people's assessments were going up, so they were thinking that we were actually not going out with a 0, which
Correct.
we were going out with a 0, but that's the whole equalization rate.
Yep. And the whole assessment piece. As we look at this, this is a good example of that. I don't know if I can. This is the tax rate estimated. All we're doing right now is giving an estimate because we don't know what the town assessment rates are going to be or the equalization rates are going to be. And those don't come out and get tallied until August. Right now, assessments are going out. In May, you can go to your assessor and talk to them about that. In August, that information is given to us, and then we put the levy over it. So right now, as we estimate this for next year, based just on the one factor, the rate per thousand would be $12.98. Because right now, our actual over here in August is what does come out in the end. So in the end, last year, our tax rate per true was $12.60. So the estimated increase is $12.98. So that 38 cents is the increase per thousand that we can estimate right now. But if you look at this entire graph, always our estimate is higher than the actual because the assessments keep increasing and the spread of the pie, I guess it's hard to explain, makes the rate go down based on more factors than just what we know now. So we're estimating the 38 cent per thousand increase, so essentially $100,000 of assessments are $38. Chances of that being that high are low, but that's the best estimate that we can give out at this time with the factors that we know.
And if I can just add a bit to that slide. So there's some confusion when people say, oh, okay, well, last year it passed by like 1,000 votes when you went out at 3%, the second time we went out. But they said, so they're like, we're not really worried this time, but even at 299, we see other districts in Onondaga County going out at like 235. And what I had to explain to them was that when we go out at 299, that brings in $960,000. When a district, let's say like West Genesee, goes out with 2.35, they're bringing in almost $4 million. And so when you look at Skinny Atlas or FM or other ones, it's not so much what's the percentage, it's what is it actually bringing in, which is the whole wealth index for that district. So it's not just looking at that percentage, it's looking at what it actually brings in.
These are the full value tax rates from last year across Oswego County. So we are in the yellow. So we are definitely right in the middle of what's happening in the county. Fulton, Hannibal, Phoenix have a much higher tax rate than we do. Basically, Mexico is close to us. The smaller districts, APW, and Hannibal or Sandy Creek down there in the end are a lot smaller. And Oswego City and Fulton City, they're cities, so it's a little bit different the way their assessments work compared to the central school districts. This is just our tax rate on True, and so as you can see, our rate is going down, and that's a factor of basically not going to our cap every year. When we're doing the zeros and we're not going to the 6.83 or 38, whatever it was last year, we're losing rate. So it's essentially, we could have taxed and didn't tax or didn't get the tax. So on the proposition next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, will be the general fund budget is always proposition number 1. So when you vote for the budget, all you're voting for is a total expenditure line. You're really not voting for what exactly is in the budget per se and or where the money's coming from. It's just the total expenditures. Proposition number 2 is for the transportation. We've got 6 gas, diesel buses, big buses, 3 small buses, and 2 transit vans. And then the state also requires us to let the libraries put their propositions, depending on how the library is formed, I should clarify that. They can write their propositions on our voting procedure. So this is the Central Square Library, increasing their levy by $30,000 in addition to the current $95,000 that they currently assess across the district's voters. We also have 3 seats with 3-year terms that are being voted on during this budget vote. There are 5 candidates that are running for the board. We have Amy Connolly as a candidate. Casey Morey is up for re-election and is running. Tim Hart is a candidate. Steve Patch is up for re-election and is running. And Christy Fishman is up for re-election and is running. So the board members will be voted on also next Tuesday. So we try to end this with a few little good newses to remember what is it, why are we here, and that it's all about the kids. So I think it's very important to remember and to understand that this year, Central Square District did, like, it led Oswego County in our math and ELA scores. We've made great advances. 50% of the students met or exceeded standards for ELA, 46% for math, and our standing across the whole county was the highest in both those areas. Our National Honor Society had 36 new inductees this year. DECA took 19 students actually I should say, took their students to state, and 19 of our students placed. We had notable achievements in almost all athletic departments. 3 of our high school students competed at the state levels in track and field. The bowling team was Section 3 champions. Our music went to the American Choral Directors Association Conference. We had productions, War of the Worlds, Les Mis, and I believe there was a middle school one that's going on now. Yep. Yep. And we had actually a couple of workshops or after school, look at me, I'm threes. They had one at Cole, and where was the other one? Hastings. So that was worked with the county to work with that, which was awesome. So we just want everybody to remember that it's very important to come out to vote. Your vote counts. It's next Tuesday, a week from today. We have 3 voting sites, the American Legion here in Central Square, the VFW in Constantia, and the Brewerton site this year is going to be in the elementary school. So is there any questions?
So before we open it up
Okay.
to anybody that wants to have anything to say as part of the open hearing, again, I just want to underscore a couple of the key things that you said. First, our scores have risen to be the best in the county, and it doesn't happen by just happenstance. So the training, the professional development, the people that you see at that table right there, our teachers, our administrators, across the board, all of the positions are all doing exactly what we tasked them to do. And we're very happy to see the results, especially for our massive literacy initiative. That it means something. We're seeing the highest graduation rates that we've had in the 10 years that I've been superintendent, and I know beyond that. We're very proud of our 3 pathways that we have, the traditional college and career pathway, which is not the number one served pathway. The number one served pathway are the kids that are going either to a 2-year college or right into the workforce. And so when you look at our traditional college and a university pathway, our 26 college courses that we offer here at the high school, I have had more parents than I can count tell me how much thousands of dollars that we've saved because basically their kids are matriculated as sophomores. He said that I can share it. I'm going to former board president Andrew Martin's daughter, Katie, who is graduating 1 full year early from the University of Buffalo pre-med with all the college courses that she took that cost the families nothing. And the reason why they cost the families nothing is because it wasn't fair, and I said this when we had the forum here a few weeks ago in this very room, that it's not fair to have a kid sitting in that room in any of those college dual credit courses whose family can afford to pay. And now when the kid gets a good grade in that class, it also is their college credit, which is a huge savings. Because if they had to take that on a college campus, it would be in the high thousands to take that course, compared to the students sitting next to them that would also could get the same grade, but only get high school credit instead of college credit because the parent couldn't afford that portion of what it is, even though it's significantly cheaper than in that college campus. So we paid for that. We also send more kids to City BOCES programs, their skill trades, CTE, than we've ever sent. So when I came here, it was kind of capped unofficially, but it was around 75 if you go back 11 years ago. We have 185 kids pursuing their dreams, many of which go on to do that trade and use those certifications to make a great living. So we're proud of that. And then we have probably the strongest military pathway out of any of the schools that I've ever worked for of how many kids every year get accepted or go into the military enlist, but also it seems like every other year we have a student that gets accepted into one of the elite military academies, which is very, very impressive. With all of that being said, obviously that there is a cost, and I can't call people, I can't tell them to go out, vote yes for the budget, but I can tell them to go out and vote. And what we put out there, we feel is a great program. The board has supported us in our efforts with whatever career pathway that these students want, that they have a great opportunity. We have very safe schools. I see a couple of our special patrol officers here. We have a special patrol officer in every building, and we will continue to have 6 special patrol officers. There was a thought that was going through our mind with the proximity of the troopers barracks, as close as it is, basically in Hastings' backyard, but it's still not having a person in that building. And given everything that's going on in society and the tragedy, that was an investment that we needed to make and that we need to maintain. So we did a multi-million-dollar capital project not that many years ago that really fortified our schools. We have the ballistic, proof glass in the locked-in vestibule area where it's every building just has one way to get in and out. And after seeing what's happened in many districts across the state and the country, nobody asks me anymore, why does it have to be like a prison? It's so hard to get in. Nobody calls me and asks me that, but they did several years ago. And I guess it's kind of unfortunate that they don't have to call and ask me anymore, because now they know just by turning on the news, flipping up, or turning on their computer and reading what's going on out there. So with all of that, I think that the 2.99%, again, that's $38 on a $100,000 house, $76 on a $200,000 house, $114 on a $300,000 house, is a sound investment. Like she said, $76 million is already set with contracts, right? Contractual obligations, whether that's our teachers, whether that's our custodians, whether that's administrators, whether that's district office administrators. Those are competitive salaries because we want to be able to hire and retain the very best. And we feel that the 2.99% will help us. Like Maureen said, we're in a very difficult spot because there's a cap on the only 2 revenue sources that a district has. The foundation aid, which is the largest portion of state aid, is capped at, right now, 1% increase. And the other part is the taxes. So it's not just rural districts that are struggling. Wealthier districts that always relied on the property tax because they don't really need the state aid. So for the wealthier districts, we get $68 million in state aid. Wealthier districts get a far smaller amount, but now their property tax is capped as well, so they can't rely on that. So this crisis, this formula that's outdated, that really was in place in 2007, hadn't changed till 2025, really needs to be thrown out and completely changed. Because there's no way a district can sustain and bring in the very best teachers and the best administrators, the best district office, best everybody, and continue to do all of these, most of them unfunded mandates from the state without the money to be able to do that. We are the largest employer in all of Oswego County with almost 800 employees, and part of that are their health benefits. And people can say, well, cut the health benefits, cut the salaries. When you do that, you will see a direct correlation to the state test scores, to graduation rate, because I can name a bunch of school districts where they aren't paying competitive rate for their teacher salaries or their admin or their superintendent or the people that sit at that table right there. And unfortunately, the staff they get are the staff that didn't get jobs in the other districts. And so it's really important to remember that as well. With that being said, Maureen, I'll kick it back to you and then kick it to the crowd.
Yeah. So it is a public hearing, which normally there's no participation from the crowd, but if there are questions, they can be entertained by us and the board tonight.
Morning. Quick thing. Westman, they're back. I know before we used to be in Cole, or in Constantia. We're still here in the square? Okay.
West Monroe? No.
Yes.
If you're on that side of 81, you're at VFW.
The VFW? Okay, because I know last year we had to come. Yeah, last year we did. We had to come.
Did we change it some, Pearl?
Yes.
Maybe a little bit. Okay. So
No. It was last year. There were some people
There
wanting
was
to
a
know why
couple
they
of
had to
road-
drive all the way, and we did
there
take
was a couple of roads.
a
that
couple of the
changed.
roads that were difficult.
Yes. But to say that West Monroe is over there, I wouldn't go that far. It was a
'Cause I
couple
know
of roads.
We live very close to the
Yep.
Constantia line, and we had to come here
Okay.
to.
What I would
So
say,
call
good,
Pearl.
good question. What I would
Yeah.
say is this: on our website, they have a link that says if you're registered and where you're going to vote.
Okay.
I would assume it's going to say exactly where it was switched to last year.
Okay.
But it's right on our website, and if you click on that.
And if you can't get it for some reason, call Pearl because she's got access to
Okay.
all of the data. Okay, thank you. Anybody? Does the board have any questions?
Well, as always, thanks. Thank you.
Might be my last
Okay, if I could,
presentation.
That was Maureen's last presentation, as she is retiring.
if I could get a motion to adjourn the open public hearing,
I'll make a motion.
get a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, on to the open regular meeting.
Do we have to open it, Pearl? Yeah.
All right, can I get a motion to open the regular meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? I'm going to make one change to the agenda to approve the agenda underneath the open regular meeting. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda for the open meeting?
I'll second. And now discussion, what do you change?
I'm going to put the approval of the meeting agenda under, because I don't think we did that.
Okay.
All those in favor? Okay, on to the community open forum. I will read this again. The Board of Education has set aside time for an opportunity for the community to address the board. To allow public participation, a period not to exceed 30 minutes shall be set aside during the first part of each board meeting. Presentation should be as brief as possible. The board will not permit in public session discussion involving individual district personnel or students. Comments should be related to school matters and be limited to 2 minutes. I have one that is signed up. Randy, take it away.
All right, can you guys hear? Oh, jeez. All right, so you can't tell people to come out and vote yes, but I have no such restriction. Everybody, tell everybody you know, find 10 people, drive them out, get them to the vote. Find every person you know, make a game of it. Maybe go out and have coffee afterwards. But every parent should be finding everybody they know and bring them out and vote yes for this. We do not want to be coming back in this room in a few weeks and having to make a decision about what else it is that we need to let go of. So to that end, I know that some people may know I've been going around knocking doors, and I have flyers that have the information. I have the link where people can check their registration, some impacts of the budget, what it means to vote yes, that 38 per every 100,000. Hey, it's cheaper than a Netflix subscription. I already like that line. That's a good one. But I've been out there, and it's not hard if you want to talk to your friends and tell them what it means to convince people. It's $38 per 100,000. It's not that much. If somebody's struggling, there are tax exemptions that they can go on the site. Maureen, thank you very much for handing me some of the information about that. The village, the town of Hastings, the county of Oswego all participate in programs that if you're somebody that's struggling with property taxes on a fixed income, you can get some money back. Won't work until next year, but it's something. Something else I've been working on, Tom, you were just talking about, is foundation aid. Last year, when we sat in this room and that budget failed, when you guys came out aggressively at 6.8, which I thought was the right move too, Dave, you said something that really got under my skin. You were talking, that's our money. That is our money that's getting sent to Albany that we're not getting back to pay for our schools, and I took that personally. You're 100% right with that. So I spent this year trying to figure out what it is that I can do and making as many connections as I can to try to figure out how do we advocate for that. A couple weeks ago, I had an opportunity to go down to Albany speak in front of, she's probably about a dozen members of the Assembly, half dozen members of the Senate. I got to speak with the Senate Majority Leader, and the only thing that I talked to them about, while everyone else was, kissing butts and doing all the things that people like to do when they're talking to folks down in Albany, was saying, foundation aid means a ton to our district. I told them how every year we have to sit in a room and we have to make decisions. What is it that we're going to get rid of this year? How we lost our late bus and what that means that now there are students that don't have opportunities unless they have parents that can drive them in and out of here. I told them about how you guys are always here making decisions about how we can do more with less, how we have administrators, teachers, you folks taking on multiple roles to keep the impact from the students. And good job for all of that. So we went from, I stood in a room of 400 people, union leaders, congressmen, and I told them what foundation aid means to us. So they're all still pushing for that 2%. Right now, it's the executive that's still kind of fighting them over that 1%. So next ask, I know I already asked a lot of people to call Senator Ryan and Assemblyman Barkley. Call the executive. Call Kathy Hochul. I know everybody's got a pretty strong opinion about her. Lord knows I do too. Tell her. 1% is what that's nonsense. With the way that inflation's going up, fuel costs, healthcare, it's just not going to be enough. We are expecting Micron that's going to come in and it's going to bring in a younger population, not at a rate that's going to do anything for me. My son's in second grade, and I've been watching the speed that the county's been preparing for Micron to come here, and it's not going to be fast enough. I know that you guys are going to be in this room and that you're going to make decisions that are going to be in the best interest of those students. Amazing, thank you. But until we get the state to listen, we're going to be back here again next year. We're going to be making difficult decisions. We're going to be fighting sports, music, no more. So I'm going to be working on a petitioning process this year where I'm going to try to get members from all around the county to tell Albany, time to throw this equation out and fix this. Either that or give us, 7% is what we would need to maintain every function year on? So, I know, that's a lot to ask. I'd take 5.
I take 2 at this point. I know. For this year.
But again, by the time we get to where my son is in school, in high school, what else are we going to have to get rid of? And I see you guys working hard to try to maintain what we got, and thank you very much. Also, hey, Saturday, you all did a really good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for all you're doing.
Okay, thank you very much. On to item D, special presentation to the board. Rosanna Bain.
I'm not usually held back by a mic. I'm going to have to move around a little bit. I generally have room to dance. No. My name's Roseanne Bain. I am the assistant superintendent at City BOCES. And I know many of your faces, but not all of them. Background information is just that I'm a Oswego County girl, graduated in 1983 from Mexico High School. Yes, that makes me 61 years old. And I've always had a general care and concern about the kids from Oswego County. And that's kind of why I've stuck around, even though I'm very eligible for retirement. Because this thing called New York Inspires, I think is that impactful, is that important to the kids, especially the kids in Oswego County. A quick background story, when I first started teaching at APW, I'm certified in English and social studies. I taught both at the same time. So the kids had 2 credits when they came to my room. And it was an exceptional program with kids doing very well, especially students with disabilities. Because when you combine the content together and you make sense of like US history and US literature, kids are like, oh, that makes sense, right? Well, unfortunately, APW had to cut my program because of an unfunded mandate. And the fact that the program was working for kids, the fact that the program had, underserved, underprivileged kids that were soaring was irrelevant because they had to meet this new mandate called AIS, which was something the state added in a positive way to get kids academic intervention services. But what that meant, especially in a small school, is that when you looked at my class, which was a double period, because kids were getting 2 credits, suddenly they couldn't fit AIS in because it was a singleton. So I said, it was like, let's make a deal. I said, I don't need 90 minutes a day with them. You give me 45 and I can get them through both the standards in both areas. And you know what? They couldn't do that because of Carnegie units and because of seat time. And every child has to have 180 minutes per week in a 40-week year in order to earn 1 credit. So even though I could get kids across the threshold to earn both those credits in half the time, my program had to be canceled. A year and a half later, I became an administrator, right? Because I'm like, I can't do it like this. And the reason I tell you that story is because if New York Inspires existed back in 2003, I might still be teaching. I might not have ever stepped into the role of an administrator, because if New York Inspires existed, those unfunded type mandates would not have existed. My program would not have had to have been canceled. So that's why I'm out and I'm sharing. I want people to have the facts of what we know so far about what this thing New York Inspires is, and to be able to think almost creatively about it. Because it isn't another add-on. So you probably have all heard of the Blue Ribbon Commission. You're not going to hear about that anymore. It's done. But the state had a Blue Ribbon Commission, and this commission was brought forward with stakeholders from every area imaginable. They collected more input than any state initiative known about what do we need to do to improve education in New York State. And that Blue Ribbon Commission, in November of 2024, presented to the Board of Regents. So they presented the results of their 3 years of research to the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents' feedback was the group that was the most impactful to them were the students who spoke about what their education was like and what they would like it to be like in the future. So the Board of Regents then took the recommendations from that Blue Ribbon Commission, and they put those recommendations out into this Blue Ribbon Commission booklet. They asked for feedback from around the state. They received a ton of feedback. And then New York State Education Department created New York Inspires. So now you won't hear about Blue Ribbon Commission anymore. New York Inspires is the name of what's moving forward for us as a state. So a lot of people have heard about this thing called the Portrait of a Graduate. And they'll say, I want to do a training on the portrait of the graduate, the portrait of the portrait, the portrait, the portrait. And I'm like, okay, settle down, because we're forgetting parts of it. What they did is they said, from all of that information that we received, there's more, we need transformation in this state. Not add-ons, not small changes, transformations. So what they did is they created 4 transformations. These are essentially the 4 themes or the 4 buckets of transforming education in New York State. The first bucket is adopt a New York State portrait of a graduate. The second bucket is we're going to redefine what a credit is, redefine time, redefine what a learning experience is. The third is we are going to sunset diploma assessment requirements. We are one of only a very few states that have what's called a dual-edged sword to graduation, where students have to earn credits and they have to pass 5 assessments. In the majority of states, students just have to earn credit to graduate. And in our state, students have to earn credits and pass 5 specific assessments. And finally, the other transformation is moving to only one high school diploma. Right now, in New York State, we have 3. And believe it or not, we do not have a state transcript. And I review transcripts for school districts to help them determine, can a student graduate? And it's like you need a Rosetta Stone between they all look absolutely different. So by the end of New York Inspires, every school district in New York State has to have the exact same transcript. So these are some monumental changes as a state. Any questions about this first, just this is how we got to where we are?
Does this apply to private schools as well?
It does not apply to private schools unless your school accepts certain funding. So some schools that are parochial do accept funding for title, for reading. So different rules apply depending on what your school accepts. Schools that do not accept any federal or state funding do not have to adhere to this. The colleges are part of this, and I've presented at SUNY Oswego. There's a lot of concern about transcript, but before the transcripts start rolling in with this information, I do think that it will be resolved. Anything else? So, why? The reason that all of these changes happened, folks, the majority of them go back to equity. Equity, like, Tom was sharing, well, I think we have this or we have that in our district, and that's fantastic. But a district 10 miles down the road doesn't have it. But then a district 10 miles down the road this way has 3 times as much as you. So what the education department found, our commissioner found, and they said, is that your zip code should not determine your opportunities in New York State. And that right now in New York State, your zip code determines your opportunity. So that's problematic. Secondarily, all of the research, and I do apologize, I left the copies I had for you on my desk. Pearl has this, and there's information attached to it if you want to look at any of the statistics. But identity has a huge impact on graduation in New York State. So if you happen to be a student with a disability, if you happen to be a student who is black or brown and male, it's a combination for the lowest graduation rates in New York State. So number one was there's some inequities. We need to look at our requirements, look at our opportunities. Are they meeting the needs of all students? And we have had such a compliance-driven system. You can look at a poor guidance counselor, and they have this checklist, and they're not able to talk to a student maybe about their future goals because they're like, all right, you've taken the global studies 3 times. We need to get you through it by, you're going to go to AIS. The compliance has driven the career pathways out of a lot of kids' lives. Instead of being in classes that are of interest to their career, they're often in classes to meet a checklist. And the state has said that has had unintended consequences. College and career readiness, as much as we say those words, the state has found there's only a certain number of students getting those skills. And employers tell us kids are great when we give them a list, and they'll do whatever on the list. But when the list is done, they're kind of like waiting, not having to critically think as much because of a compliance-driven system. Students, the inevitable question, when am I ever going to use this? And oftentimes a teacher not able to answer except It's in the curriculum guide. So that doesn't excite any of us, and it certainly doesn't excite students when they don't have a connection to why they are learning something. And in the most successful systems, just like in the most successful workplaces, there's agency or choice. You have a little choice about what you're going to do with your career as a student. But when you have a compliance system, there's no area in the schedule for you to have real choice. Oh, maybe you get one elective in 3 years. And finally, the state found that across the state, from school district to school district, and within school districts, they were inconsistent, meaning that rules and things at this elementary school in this district didn't match the rules and expectations at the middle school in the same district. And so they found that over and over again. So there's like Portrait of a Graduate is designed to create that coherence no matter what building you're in. So that's the why. And this is the schedule. So last year was planning. Did you miss it? It confused me when I saw this because I said, we didn't have a planning year. That was the state's planning year. Right now, 2025 through 2027, it's called installation. That's what we're in right now. And installation, I call it bringing on hearts and minds. This is a 2-year period to teach people about it, for the state to make the changes they need to regulations, to get teachers starting to think about how they would adjust, how schedules might have to change, what might look different in transportation, et cetera. Installation is a phased-in system. This is your chance to think, work as districts to talk about, to plan, but not full implementation. Initial implementation begins in the fall of 2027, and so the kids that are currently in 10th grade, when they graduate, they're going to be the first group impacted by New York Inspires. So it's not full implementation yet, but that group of kids will be the first ones. And then finally, by the fall of 2029, every school district in New York State has to have full implementation and scaling up of the things I'm going to share with you about New York Inspires. Any questions before I move on?
I do. Is there plans to provide funding to do all of this? You know, like additional money? Because I know this isn't you.
No.
But the state took at least 3 years, right, to get its head wrapped around what it wants to do and it wants the districts to do. But in the 2 years that we're going to be implementing it, I just wonder if they've thought about the fact that we will also still be providing a full-time education to these students on top of implementing. So it's like another task for us to accomplish, training the teachers, reorganizing schedules. But we're also going to be doing all the things that we normally have to do to get ready for that school year as it was before implementation. And so I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion about providing additional funding to the schools to be implementing this by 2027, 2029.
Yeah, so the funding discussion isn't one that happens with my level, except to say that
Not sure that it happens.
but except to say that some of those unfunded mandates are definitely going away. And when we go further in the presentation and you know, for example, that Regents exams are no longer going to be required to graduate, what does summer school funding look like when you don't have to worry about kids actually passing an exam? Because I can tell you from my experience in regional summer school, that's our #1 goal all the time, is to get kids through Regents exams. Well, if that's not the goal anymore, how can that funding be used differently? The state has worked the last 5 years on something called the Plan Pilot, which is in 3 BOCES and 30 districts, creating brand new assessments, which are related to authentic assessments. And all of that's going to be provided to districts for free. They have some planning, and I do believe there will be a little more flexibility in the budget for mandates changing. But I can't say that there are any line items for the budget.
Just to underscore that real quickly, and it's perfect that you're the person that's here right now. So sometimes it's not a mandate, but they come out with the priority, right? So before the pandemic, we didn't have any counselors in our elementary buildings. We didn't have any social workers in our elementary buildings. That was a plan that we were looking to do before the pandemic hit, but that's when then Governor Cuomo had talked about the 20% cut to education. So we were bracing for millions of dollars of a gap. And so that kind of derailed that. And then COVID, then we realized we can do it. Then the COVID money went away, but that's almost $1 million that we're paying now that we weren't before. And there's not a week that goes by that we don't have an elementary or middle or high school student getting an ambulance like we did today for a mental health check because the student's talking about self-harm. And so that's where I think some parents, because they're the ones that come to board meetings, or they're the ones whose kids are in, a lot of the sports or band, that maybe they're not dealing with the same level of crisis. Doesn't mean it's not happening here, but it is happening here. And so we can't eliminate that counseling supports and social workers. So that wasn't a mandate that the state said, hey, you have to have this many counselors, social workers. But for us to be able to sustain that and provide we used to have a record number of kids that we would have, they would be in major crisis, and we'd have to constantly evacuate classrooms. People would call, they'd call me, they'd call board members. That has dwindled down significantly because we have the counselors and those kids are getting the supports that they need. And so I just wanted to be able to say that, because even though that's not an actual mandate, that's a reality that we had to heavily invest in.
You're preaching to the choir here, Tom.
That's what I'm saying. Well, the reason why I said I'm glad you're here
Like-
is you opened our eyes several years ago, and then you actually updated things that we don't want to be number one in.
Right.
Oswego
And-
County's
and
number
we
one
are.
in suicide.
Yeah.
We're number
Yes.
one in adolescent depression and
Yeah.
anxiety.
Obesity. Yeah, we've got it all.
The need for quality food and
Right.
the food deserts that we're in.
Yeah. I guess if I were to put it up front, because I did meet with your business officials about this already, so Maureen could tell you, I put together pages of, hey, here are some resource considerations for you. Things that you could back off of, things that you might want to add to, things that you want to think about in the future. Because for this to be done correctly, you're going to need more guidance counselors or school counselors, because right now, most of your counselors have this list, A through J, and they get 5 minutes per year with each child. Well, if you're doing an individual pathway for a child, if you are trying to set up work-based learning experiences for them, if you are going to be counting credits differently, counting assessments differently, the person currently doing that job is going to need a lot more than 5 minutes per child. And I know from my experience in the high school, as high school principal, that lists often were put together that way. Per year, you get 6 minutes per child. And a lot of schools might look at and say, okay, we're going to have to look at what we have for staffing, and do we need work-based learning coordinators? Do we need counselors? Do we need someone to help put together these plans for kids?
And the reality is 40% of our kids are being raised by their grandparents right now. And in some elementaries, it's about 65%. And they don't have the ability to sit with their kids like a lot of the parents do and go over all of these things, look at course catalogs and whatnot. They just don't.
No.
And so to your point, it's now expected that the school needs to do that.
And I think we all know that making a choice about your career and what you want to do as a senior is a little too late, right? That a lot of this discussion and excitement needs to happen in the middle school, in younger ages.
And I think, you're the one holding the pointer, so you're going to take all the blunt and the responsibility of this, right?
I'm really proud.
But it's astonishing to me that the state is going to dictate, if you're really going to change the system, it needs to start at the top, right? And that, to Christie's point, the state has had 3 years to kind of figure out that there was a problem, right? We're here locally, at this table of elected officials, because that's what we are, right? And we have a table over there of fine find administrators. We can figure this out. You know, the point blank, as far as I'm concerned, is just get out of our way. Stop telling us what to do and how best to serve the students and how to go. It's really that simple. You know, pathways and career opportunities, we're already doing that at Central Square. I mean, even if you're saying, well, you're going to need more counselors, that's an unfunded mandate.
Right.
Right? Because a counselor is pretty expensive. It's about $120,000 a year, all said and done. Right? And you're going to say we're going to need 3 more. I mean, we added a counselor here, but how you're going to do a CTE, and we've been working on it here for the district for a year, right, with BOCES. But what's the progress compared to a Liverpool who's standing up a brand new school for their CTE program? So, you know, there's a lot of inequities, and if you just, as I see it in my 9 years being on this board, if you just, the state just get out of the way. Because what happens, I lived in New York City for 10 years. I'm an alum of Central Square. It's a lot different in New York City than it is in Central Square. Okay, it's a lot different in Long Island. So if you're, you know, I had the distinct opportunity to go to the Regents Board meeting with Tom, and I looked in that room and listened to the speeches, and I said, I could fix this if I fired every single one that would attend that meeting that come from the state, okay? There was more backslapping, hand grabbing, oh, look at what we've done. It has nothing to do with Central Square. Long Island has nothing to do with Central Square. Get out of our way. And I know you're holding a
No,
pointer.
so what I could say to you is this. I've been in education a while. To me, this is the most freeing of anything I've seen in my 30-plus years. So it may not be what you're dreaming of, but it's a lot better than anything I've seen before.
No, and I get
So
it.
and I understand
I'll say
where you're
one more
coming
thing
from.
to his point. It's our money. It's our money. It's not the state's money. They're not holding bake sales to raise funding. It comes down to funding. It comes down to great teachers in a great way to educate kids and to have a 7-year plus plan. 7 years, you're going to have 7 graduating classes by that time. It just doesn't.
That was my point
The
too.
la-
that I
and the
was gonna
last
make.
thing that I'll say, because I know you got a great presentation, is that the state's priority, and I hear it all the time, and that is to make sure that we can actually provide our students with the pathway in the skills trade, because we know there's a massive shortage across New York State, across the country, but they say that. But if they really want to put the money where their mouth is, and they know that BOCES programs, really, we can't afford to start it. They're junior and senior year. But if they really recognize that that pathway really has to start in middle school with providing those pre-apprenticeships, and then when the time they get to high school, there could be those kids that become our dropout rate, but they're amazing, hands-on, that they want to work in the skills trade, that if they could literally start high school in 9th and 10th grade, and we had the money to be able to do that, to say if there were BOCES programs, that would be a game changer, not only for the kids, but for all of these companies that are screaming out. You were in the room with the chiefs when the guy, you were there, right, when the guy came in?
From the construction union?
Yes, and he was saying that there's a need right now for thousands and thousands of jobs where kids will be able to walk right in $100,000 jobs as technicians. They can't fill those jobs, and it's only going to be even more when Micron comes. So if the state could recognize that and redo how they're doing their funding to say, okay, we're woefully underserving our 700 school districts with the money that we're giving them in foundation aid, but yet we want them to accomplish A, B, and C, but we're not really giving them the money to fund a program that's adequate to accomplish that.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, and I've never heard the administration more excited about this getting rid of the barriers and the guardrails and
Some of the
everything.
barriers, I mean, it's
Yeah.
the state.
Yeah, so it's.
They'll throw
it's
something
not-
at
I
us,
mean,
but it's-
we're
it's
excited about
better
it, but
than-
it's not, let's go.
Well,
Let's go.
But I think it's a good place to start. I mean, I've had a kid in my own home, right, who was an amazing hands-on student, right? I could give that kid anything to weld and think of 6 different solutions that nobody else can figure out. And, you know, he's 19 years old and he just got moved up to a crane position, but he struggled in school. And he didn't struggle in school because we don't have an awesome district, because we have an awesome district that when he moved here, touch with what their kids need and they weren't testing them on the right stuff to begin with, absolutely. I just wish that they would start to fund all of their bright ideas so that all of us didn't have to foot the bill. But I do think it's a good place to start.
And I will say that when you talk about the timeline, we've met with some of the Board of Regents members have come to our county meetings for superintendents, and they're like, we think it's moving way too slow. And then school districts around the state are going, you're going way too fast. So it, like you said, that not every region is the same, and some regions are louder. And so the feedback has been mixed, and I think that for our teachers, when you hear the rest of this, I think that the approach is decent to get change started while still giving people time to make those changes. If you sit on a board, you've heard of Part 100 regulations. These are all of the regulations that have to be amended in order to make New York Inspires works. So I like to share this just to show that it's not simply another add-on. They are changing everything from general school requirements all the way down to summer school requirements and everything in the middle. And they actually, unlike other times in my career, they actually have these scheduled, like as to when they're discussing them, when they're voting on them. They have a plan so that these changes can take place simultaneous to their timeline. So this is a busy slide, but to give you an idea of that timeline push. So kids who are currently in 11th and 12th grade, that's cohort 2023 and prior, they're under the old system, meaning they need 22 credits and they need the 5 assessments to graduate. They can get one of the 3 diplomas, and yet the one thing the state put in place, and this is just a fairness thing, the kids that graduate before this group, they had COVID exemptions for their regencies. The kids that are sitting in high school with them right now in 10th grade are going to have complete exemption from all Regents exams. You've got this little group of 11th and 12th graders who do not have any of those types of exemptions. So the state did do an emergency exemption that students can request an exemption due to major life events. Only the students that are in 11th and 12th grade. You won't need it if you're in 9th and 10th grade because you're not going to need an exemption. Now, the exemption language is loose and a little bit liberal, up to a superintendent to determine if the event is considered major. My cat got hit on the morning of the test. I was very because the Regents exam has to be taken between this hour, and you can't take it at another time, right? So there was that a major life event? Or, my dad died 2 months ago. I'm still processing that. I haven't been, I can't think straight. It is up to superintendents to make these determinations. That's the only thing different for students in 11th and 12th grade, that this exemption exists for them. Now, when you get to your kids that are currently in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, the phase-in starts. It's still 22 credits, but you'll notice it does not say Regents exams. So the students that are currently in 10th grade will have their diploma assessments, what it's called, decoupled. Decoupled means removed from law, no longer required to graduate. And one diploma. So kids that are in 10th grade, they'll no longer be having to choose or earn local regents or regents with advanced designation. They will earn one New York State diploma, but that diploma will have seals and endorsements that will designate differences. So something that a student did, like technical endorsement, a science endorsement, every student's diploma will look a little bit different based on their skill set. Now, kids that are currently in 6th and 7th grade, For them, the new credit requirements will be in place by the time they get to 9th grade. More seals and endorsements will be available. In diploma assessments, the Regencies will be sunset. The difference between decoupled and sunset is this. Decoupled is removed from requirement to graduate. Sunset is cannot be used to determine whether a child passes a class. It cannot be used for students' averages because they're not a 0 through 100 scale. So sunsetting the Regencies means they can still be used, but they can't be used to determine whether a child earns credit. So that's what that means. And finally, by 2029, that's our current 5th graders, full implementation. Their credits will be proficiency in learning standards and portrait of a graduate, 1 diploma, and that statewide transcript.
And on the first one, that first comment, it's important that everyone realizes, Steve Patch, board president, just said that we had added a counselor in the high school. Here's another perfect example on why we needed to do that. So let's say a grandparent who's raising a kid passed away, but that other grandparent doesn't realize that that could be an exemption, and they're not going to do that, but the counselor knows what the kid went through, saw the kid struggled and failed the test, and said, they've come to me to say, Tom, this kid's eligible for this, whether the parent is aware of it or not. But again,
Yeah.
that takes work with all the lists of kids for them to know what's going on with their kids.
And some of the other exemptions that we have, like, the safety net of a superintendent determination, that requires a parent to request it, but this does not require a parent to request it. We find a lot of students who fell through those cracks because their parents were not available to request it for them. So this portrait of a graduate. The portrait of the graduate is actually the anchor of the entire system. That's why you hear a lot about it. And it is the destination for all students K through 12. And the elementary builds the base of these competencies. The middle school expands the capacity. And then by high school, you need to be demonstrating, verbing the readiness. So the portrait looks like this. And it outlines the shared vision for student success. So that idea of creative innovation, critical thinking, effective communication.
Looks awful familiar.
Well, and you will see that there's been controversy from people who are like, well, we kind of have this already. Can we keep ours, or do we have to adopt the state's? These are the words that are going to be on the statewide transcript. So if school districts have developed their own with a little bit of different wording, it will just become confusing.
I think those were our words 10 years ago. Global citizen, effective communicator, critical thinker. I mean, we're using these words now, but we had a lot more.
Yeah.
But it's literally looks exactly the same way as it did as the attributes and competencies of the Central Square Learner 9 years ago.
So the change that they made between when they first introduced it and finalized it is that the culturally responsive sustaining education piece is the bullseye. That equity piece is that always in the mind. They didn't want it to be a piece of the pie so that some people did it and some didn't. So it is the centerpiece. So this is, competencies are being built for this and at all grade levels, meaning when I used to teach social studies, for example, I'd say Peloponnesian War, we'll talk about that for 2 minutes, and I have to move to the next one. The curriculum was so there was so much breadth to it. The state is now saying that instead of that content being, an inch deep, it's now going to be, a mile deep, and that in the sense that we are reducing standards instead of adding to them. So that is a huge shift and a huge change. So as a district, now is the installation time over the next 2 summers to be saying already, if you've had this for 9 or 10 years and other districts have too, then the leap to say, where in this lesson are you using creative innovation? Where are, that now is that time for that. And what the state found is that some students were reaching all the competencies and other kids were not. And they were still graduating, but they didn't have this, they had not reached the same competencies. And if test scores and Regents exams are not available anymore in the same format, then how do you actually measure progress as a district? So the Regents exam story is like this. The Regents exams are going to be decoupled. It's expected to be pending the regulatory approval. There's pretty strong, sense for approving this. However, they're not being eliminated. They're being reframed, meaning a test, a standardized test can be useful for certain information, right? The best system is probably going to be a marriage of standardized tests and authentic assessment. But we have created, as a society in New York State, we have this certain level of pride about our Regents exams. And probably in the 1970s through early 1990s, there was truth in saying students that passed these at a certain level were more college and career ready. That is no longer the case. Students are passing these assessments, and there is not a correlation that they are more prepared for college than somebody who did not pass it at the same level. But there's still good standardized tests. So let's reframe them. If a school district still wants to use Regents exams, they are still going to be available. But they're a resource. They're not the end game anymore. And part of the reason is that the Regents exam needs to be an indicator amongst multiple measures, that one test doesn't determine everything. So because it is a standardized test, it does not measure authentic learning, meaning application of the skills in a real life situation. So the state now says, kids have to demonstrate transfer. How do they take what they learned and transfer it to something other than a standardized test question? So Regents, as I said, are still available. They're just not going to be there when it comes to determining if you graduate, and they're not going to be there in the sense of determining whether or not you pass a class.
So how do you remain systemic then?
The systemic part comes from the portrait of the graduate.
But if you're saying that the Regencies are available, but you don't have to take them, am I hearing you properly? Then what if
As a school district, you make the determinations about in which courses you may or may not offer that as a one form of assessment.
Be straight through scheduling. Whenever we talked about college admissions, they always say, okay, you have a math goal, like a background that you want. Did you take the top level? No. And we still have some parents that I have professional arguments with because they want their kids to be in the top 20, which means nothing. When they want their kid to get in a top university, they're going to go, wait, but there were 2 math courses that were far more rigorous. You chose not to, so your kid can be 9th in the class? Compared to what? Who cares?
Right, you're learning more than.
If we were a smart district, we would get rid of ranking. But that is like me touching the 3rd rail on a subway. I fry myself. Just like when we talk about any reductions to bans in sports.
Well,
it's just the truth. It's just the truth. And so if we were to say get rid of ranking, because that would be the best, kids would actually take the courses that are most rigorous, not the ones that they can get 100 in, right?
So when
But in a perfect world, right, their pathway would map that out. So the goal would be, to your point, your goal would be your pathway and your success, not your ranking.
correct.
Right? So it's that groundwork in the beginning
Right.
that we're going to need these 10 counselors.
10, I said you might need a counselor. Then you said 3, and now you say 10.
So
I don't know. We've never met before, but I'm just saying.
10 or 6 minutes to at least 7.
yeah.
No, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so it would really,
If it's not
hopefully,
a
it would
counselor,
eliminate
it's a
that.
somebody.
Right. right,
has
is
to
that
have that
whatever your
conversation.
pathway is going to be,
Right.
right? If you want to be an engineer, you better be taking all the advanced math and sciences courses, if that's your pathway. But if you're not going to be an engineer, are you sitting in applied sciences and, you know, it's whatever you want to be. And we've talked about it a lot. And it's tough to look at an eighth grader and say, well, what do you want to be, little Johnny? Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's
I was
tough.
I was in P-TECH interviews last week with eighth graders, and we've now started having pictures of like what an engineer does, what an auto mechanic does, and we say to the students, when you think of P-TECH, which picture would you pick? Like, which do you see yourself doing? And that helps us immediately, because sometimes kids pick the auto mechanic, and they're like, isn't that what P-TECH is? One person says, I want to be a cosmetologist. Well, then P-TECH's not the program for you. But my parents said I'd get a free degree. You know, like, so they don't know. They don't know for sure what an engineer does in eighth grade. Some do if they have a dad who's an engineer, mom is an engineer. But when we talk about this idea of, going back to your question, Ms. Maury, about the way that one thing Regencies did was they, at the very least, I mean, when I was teaching Regencies, I knew exactly what to teach. I knew exactly which vocabulary was going to be on that assessment. It gave me a pathway, and it gave me a way to compare kids based on how they did on that test. But I also always had authentic assessments, and that's when I saw a lot of students shine differently. The number of times that I had a student with a disability that when I questioned them one-on-one, they could tell me what I taught. They could tell me the theme. But when they sat down to the pen and paper test, they couldn't show me. New York Inspires says what they share with you can be part of formative assessment. You don't have to ignore it anymore, because I would be so frustrated saying, I know they know it, right? But when it comes to the standardization piece, it goes back to portrait of a graduate and standards-based. Now, this is rocking people's worlds at the high school level to think about standards-based grading, when we've been doing it at the elementary forever, right? But that's one of the best ways to make some of those determinations, is for us to say, what are the most important standards, and how did this student achieve on that standard? And some of that achievement is measuring more than what the student knew at the knowledge level, instead of the questions that are just multiple choice. What can they do with what they know? And we see that more through capstone projects and portfolios and internships and project-based learning and community service than we do through a typical standardized test. So the state is saying school districts should be considering a marriage of the two. We understand that you still need a base level of standardization. And we're not saying throw out, the science of reading. We're saying, how do kids apply that, right? So you were just talking about this, Tom, and you have not seen this slide specifically yet, but as this learning evidence expands, we have to revisit how grades are calculated. If we have students demonstrating their learning in different ways that are not on a typical 0 through 100 scale, how do we decide class rank if it doesn't represent a full picture? If a numerical average doesn't give us a full picture? Weighted courses, dual enrollments, internships, how are they valued? And how valedictorian, salutatorian, honor roll, and academic awards will be determined in the future. These are kind of big questions, right? And how students distinguish themselves for college, scholarships, employment, and military pathways when the target for graduation has switched. So that's this 2 to 4 year period is for school districts to be thinking about, and resources will be provided for. But this slide is still all local decision.
Well, and that's the thing, it's so outdated, but some districts still do that, where at the elementary level, it doesn't say B for ELA, But I had a conversation last week with a teacher who was more nostalgia. It would just be easier if it said B. And I would say, right, but at the elementary, there's different standards for ELA. Wouldn't you want to know, is it vocabulary acquisition? Is it phonemic awareness? Don't you want to know what your kid's struggling with? Or do you just want to see 85, right? Like, it doesn't show what that is that they need. And then, like, in the high school, it's the same thing, but a big part of it is still, like, the ranking. You know, where's my kid
ranking.
rank? My kid top 5?
When I present to kids at New Visions, they have had to have some separation for counseling the day that report cards come out because someone's like, that shifted my grade by this 1/100th of a percent. I might not be the valedictorian.
Every year we have.
And they're crying. And you know, and I don't mind saying my nephew was the salutatorian at Mexico, and he said, it wasn't worth it, Aunt Roseanne. I missed out on so much. And he goes, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I still, you know, did as well as I did in school. He goes, but I wish I hadn't kept reaching for those extra points here and there. But the goal of this is not to remove that academic excellence, because what the research tells us is that authentic assessment is actually more demanding and taxing on the brain than memorization. So having to actually perform the skills that we have learned definitely has more rigor. So it is, in the colleges that I've met with, they agree that knowing more about application of skills is very important to them. So how do we make sure excellence is recognized and it's rigorous, equitable, transparent, but you want to say it's aligned to that future transcript that's going to be going to colleges and the military and employers? So as you have more information, you'll be able to make some of those decisions. So are we lowering standards? No, we're raising the level of demonstration of learning. We need clear, credible local measures of readiness. And some of those local measures, you don't have to recreate the wheel. With every school in New York State doing this, with the curriculum state development networks for the planned pilot, there's going to be a plethora of resources. But supporting communication plans to families and the communities are important because we've grown up in a system where the Regents has nostalgic meaning to people. You know, we had a better system because of the Regencies. And that was true a long time ago, but it's not true today.
When you have a residential structures teacher that they're building the slope of a roof, and the kids who typically struggle in integrated algebra with Pythagorean theorem, bored out of their minds, failed it twice, but those are the kids that look like they're on a job site with their pencil in their ear, making the formulas on the roof, doing the test, the water comes down the right way. I feel with Inspire New York is just giving us the autonomy to be able to say, all right, it's not, if this kid can demonstrate that
They can
learning,
earn credit.
bam.
There you go. The state is in the process of and sharing with us, you know, that they are eliminating seat time. So to say that you have to stay in a class for 40 weeks, for 180 minutes, some kids might need 60 weeks. Some kids might need 20 weeks. And I had kids walk into my U.S. history class who needed 0 weeks. You know, they knew more about U.S. history than I did. You know, they could have moved on to something different if my class wasn't a required credit to graduate.
My autistic son can teach that history class at West Genesee.
I would
and he
just
could
let
be in a
him
different
talk.
class.
I'm like, okay, I believe you. You're probably right. I'm probably wrong. You know, so the elimination of seat time requirements, redefining what it means to earn a credit. How do you earn a credit? That we'll be getting that information, they say by the end of this school year, the beginning of the summer, we'll be getting more information about what's a credit. But this is the statement we've received. Time supports learning, it doesn't prove it. So every student might need a different amount of time to prove their learning. Some might need a lot less, some might need a lot more. I know my advanced nephews were frustrated in elementary school, and they would be like, yeah, I was teaching the other kids. Because I know from being an elementary principal, man, you have kids walk in there, some have not held a pencil, and some have written you a welcoming letter. And, and you're like, okay, I have to teach both of these kids right now, same time. And then the opposite, that some kids need more time for processing without being told they failed. You failed the class, now you have to go to summer school, or, it's a standards-based approach looks a little bit different.
And it's equitable. I say to my kids all the time, I look at them, I'm like, you guys were born on third base and you both think you thought you hit a triple. There are kids that struggle, whose parents don't read to them, don't have the academics, don't give them all of the academic supports, that they're starting the race way behind. I kind of feel like this is kind of freeing districts up for that equity piece.
The state has lists of recommendations of things you could do. You can share rosters. You can share teachers. Students can move from one grade to another depending on where they are in specific content areas, that don't make it into such a big deal when a child is advanced or behind, that there are some of those opportunities. We're going to redefine credits, redefine the learning standards and the assessment systems, program and instructional requirements. Like something that has changed already that you've probably heard about is the Blue Ribbon Commission said overwhelmingly, people in New York State said kids need financial literacy. Kids need to have more information about finance. And so financial literacy that regulation has already been changed. There's now financial literacy requirements for next year, but they have left it very loose and saying that it isn't saying only this type of teacher can teach it and it has to be in this grade. It can be taught by many teachers. It could be taught over a number of years. It could be taught in one class. It could be a business teacher. It could be a math teacher. It could be an English teacher. Who knows? They're not being as strict as before, but they did put out a suggested, curriculum outline of the things that they think kids need to know to be financially literate in today's society. A big piece is, more and more kids are saying, I don't know what I want to do, but work-based learning and experiential experiences tell kids it's just as important to know you don't want to do something as it is that you like something. Or if somebody has told you, for instance, I went to BOCES for commercial baking, all I needed was 6 months in there to say, I like to bake, but this is not what I want to do for a living. And that saved my parents a lot of money, at the Culinary Institute of America, which is where I was supposed to be going. And I immediately was like, that's not for me.
We had a parent call us and say, your career center is amazing. My kid went there for nursing. And I'm like, oh, that's what you do? They're like, no, they hate the sight of blood. Now they realize that's not what they want to be.
Now I don't have to do
You
that.
just saved us a ton of money.
Now, areas you might have to look at contract negotiations, different things like that might come up, is in the idea of scheduling and staffing models. With the state saying, that start times can look different. Not everybody has to be at school at the same time if you don't want them to be. Like if you want, a lot of high schoolers have spoken to us and said, if you ran this CTE program from 3 to 5, man, I'd be here every day. That 8 o'clock in the morning stuff, it's just that idea that okay, well, I'd get them here at twilight. Can I do that? Yes, you can. Where before you had restrictions on some of that, we're restricted right now. We have kids that would be great in a half a day, but the regulations say we have to have a certain number of credits and they have to be here a full day to count for state aid. But the state's now saying if there is a reason supported by the superintendent, then a student doesn't necessarily have to be there a full day to count as full credit.
You're going to see a lot more of that now when kids say, my schedule is packed, but I really want to take this course that now can be offered through distance learning, then a teacher's going to say, well, wait a minute, I can make extra money teaching this course after school, and these kids all around the county, so it's sustainable to be able to do it that way, you can do it. Mm-hmm. I definitely see that will be 3 to 4 years out, we're going to see a lot more of kids taking courses outside the regular school day.
And that's that what the state's talking about with flexible learning structures. And you mentioned military earlier and when you were speaking, Tom, and yeah, the only junior ROTC in our county is Mexico, right? But Mexico has said, we'll leave a couple seats open for others in the county who might be interested. You're one of only 2 districts in this county that have a business program. Don't think that in the other 7 districts, there's not kids who are like, I'd like to pursue business, right? So what does that look like when we take the positive resources of each place in our region and we share a little bit, right? Because then kids can reach the goals and have those flexible learning opportunities. So the learning will no longer be confined to seat time and Carnegie units. What does work-based learning look like? What is your scheduling, transportation, staffing, partnerships? Who gets access to the opportunities? You might need to revise things in policies about gradings and transcripts moving forward, depending on what yours look like. So I already talked about 3 diplomas going down to 1. Students will have multiple ways to show readiness. So the thing is that this, the diploma becomes the credential, the transcript becomes the evidence. Kids will be carrying a transcript around a lot more than they would be a diploma, because the transcript is being called the multidimensional learner profile. So the idea that this is the profile of everything you've done, what you've accomplished. So it goes from this single metrics to recognizing patterns. So how will distinctions be communicated? How are you going to differentiate yourself? Now, we could have unintended consequences of going back to a system that tracks kids if we don't have the counseling / pathways ready, for kids to achieve what they want to achieve. And we talked about some of the regionalization opportunities, which quite frankly, we play together a lot nicer in this part of the state than they do in other parts of the state. I present all across the state. I've been in places where people within counties, they won't even talk to one another. But here, when we didn't have enough people to have a hockey team in every district, we said, okay, well then we'll have a county hockey team, right? We tend to be a little better at sharing here. Your board lens. New York Inspires is not just an instructional shift. It has implications for time, staffing, transportation, partnership, technology, policy, and equity. I do think the state is trying to measure that with releasing the grip on a lot of those regulations to allow districts to have a bit more freedom in making determinations about what a credit looks like, what a pathway looks like. So this is a lot of words, but these are things like, if I were to say to you, these are things you might be thinking about in these buckets. What does the student experience look like? What's their voice going to be? Instruction, people and partnerships. Not all the businesses in our region aren't going to want 9 districts calling them and saying, hey, I need to get internship. So we've had that talk about, they've actually told us that. They've said, we don't even have a person to manage that. Is there a person who could manage that for the region, or at least help organize all of these different opportunities every school district wants with all of our businesses? So there's lots of things to talk about with those partnerships. The state is really recommending more faculty externships. And we're doing that now with getting faculty out into manufacturing sites and businesses, sometimes for a few days, sometimes for a few weeks in the summer. And they come back and they're like, my curriculum makes a whole different sense now.
We sent a bunch of teachers to the OCC's clean room, for Micron's clean room.
Yep.
And even the English teacher came out with great ideas. The whole idea of project-based learning that starts with a driving question, going back to what we were doing 20 years ago.
Right.
With that, yeah.
And, so if you have a new transcript, that means we need we need new systems for how that will be done, and what does scheduling look like, and equity and access. So you have all these things coming together. But overall, I know we've taken a lot of time tonight, but it's an exciting time, in my opinion, to be in education, because I've never heard the state speak so positively about teachers before and say, you know, our teachers need more autonomy. Our teachers need the opportunity to teach. You know, that idea that I feel like they're elevating the work that educators already do. They're supporting deep learning, more professional judgment, and meaningful outcomes for every student. So I think it can bring coherence and equity. I'm hoping it does, you know, but time will tell as these, you know, amendments are coming to regulation. But as we speak now, they've kept their word on everything they've done so far. But I don't know what the future has in store for us.
Well, I think any program that puts more power in a teacher in the classroom is a positive. I know it is for this district. We have fantastic teachers. If you would just let them go, let them do what they want to do, we would be better for it, because it's just, there's great things that happen within this district every single day. And it's, you know, we're handcuffed, in my opinion, of what we have to do based on what needs to be done. And anytime that, you know, I found you know, throughout my career is that you come out with this wide casting authority, and then what happens is that it incrementally comes back in because, well, this district down here did this district down here did that, so we're going to have to tighten the reins, where really the freedom in professional educators should be far-reaching as far as I'm concerned, so.
I think Tom would tell you that I break rules more often than other people, and I've always been comfortable with that. It's kind of who I am. So when I see this, I took the PTAC program and I uncuffed everybody. And I said, what do we need to teach these 9th and 10th graders who are going to be under these new rules? And that's why my English and science teachers work together now. And people will be like, English and science? They created the coursework for those kids called environmental literature. And they're outside, and they're inside, and they're doing plays, and you're seeing kids do things that I would never imagine, especially 9th grade males doing. But they absolutely are meeting all of the standards in environmental literature, which typically would not have been an allowed course. So I do believe that the opportunity will be there to, you know, unlock those cuffs.
New York State wastes so much money, millions of dollars, billions of dollars on things that it's crazy when you look at it. But education, and I've often said, I come from a family, I have my 2 brothers and sister teachers, I have 12 cousins are teachers, my parents were teachers. If they made teaching an 11th month position and put funding in it, that teachers would have substantial pay increases, that we're going to be able to keep hiring and retaining the best of the best. But a really good teacher will tell you that 4 days of professional development, right? It's really 3 days. And then a half days, that if we had another month, that we were able to then say, okay, this is what it's going to be. Man, we could do amazing things. The state needs to recognize that and say education should be the very most important, impactful thing in the budget, along with safety.
I have principals looking at the job offers that kids at CTE are getting, and they're considering leaving the occupation. You know, we had a student leave, you know, they don't even know how to completely read the contract they got from National Grid. Because in there was a clause that was mandatory overtime at time and a half. And financial literacy, the principal sat down and said, that means you're gonna make $110,000 a year. And he's like, okay, I think I wanna go and work that job too. So I get it.
Do you know if any other states have implemented a learning dynamic that
Yeah,
this is?
so Michigan has been pretty far advanced in standards-based education. And the state has been visiting Michigan, some areas in Maine, and I'm forgetting one of my states. But they're not the first to do this, and they've been watching carefully with the progress in at least 2 other states.
So is there opportunity for this to speed up? I mean, if another state has already implemented it and it's working, why does it take us 9 years to put this into place in our own state?
I think what happens is that we have a New York State Education Department, And then we have a New York State legislature, obviously, and some of the regulations are also attached to law. And you have to get the legislature to vote on things, it's a process. The Board of Regents meets once a month, and you've been to a meeting. And getting things, there's times it's like, you come out of a meeting and a lot's been accomplished, and you don't even realize a lot's been accomplished, right? So I think that it also is the idea that the teachers on the committees said, we need time, because you want us to teach kids currently from these rules, and then you want us to be switching at the same time. And to what Tom just said, we don't have free time to do that, to make the substantial changes. And the state has had to is having to make substantial changes to its own documents.
Do you
Right,
know
and
if-
but what you're essentially saying, it's like, we need to get the politics out of education. I mean, the infighting and everything, you can't get the regulatory changes, you can't get the legislation to get on board with certain things because there's too much other political stuff getting in the way. And that's what, I feel like, to Steve's point, they need to just get out of the way and let teachers teach the
So
education.
The regulation piece that I showed you, that's 100% Board of Regents. So they can accomplish that, like, in their next 2 years.
Future teachers for New York, is this already being taught at
So,
higher education level to set them up for success?
SUNY is informed, and the state within New York Inspires also has a section on new requirements for teacher education systems that have to be implemented in the next 2 years.
Okay.
And the folks at SUNY Oswego, when I was there, they've already started, because quite frankly, folks, as much as they might want to say that kids aren't ready for college, the kids tell us, well, all they do is stand there and talk at me. Like, it's actually, I think high school was more creative, right? They are going through their own revolution at SUNY right now because
They have lecture halls.
they have lecture halls. And so we had a huge discussion in professional development on how they create authentic assessment, how they teach teachers how to do authentic assessment. And so they're working on it, and they're aware that their teacher education, school psychology, all of those programs need to shift along with this, and they have representatives on all of the committees. There's subcommittees now that are working on these different changes.
I would be more worried about the efforts for those that have to educate kids a different way than the kids adopting this. Because the kids coming up, they don't know what they don't know. And
Right,
they're
right.
resilient. But if people stay with how they've always taught and have the same expectations and they don't change, they will not be successful.
Correct, without a doubt. And in every presentation that I've done to teachers, I have a few loud voices of people who are scared.
Sure.
And I get it, because when I was teaching, my worth was measured by my Regents scores. It was frequently I was brought in and high fives was in, you got 95% or you got 90, you're doing a great job, you're a good teacher based on my Regents scores. So if we've told people that's what defines a good teacher, and then we say, those Regences are gonna be gone, of course it's scary, right? And if you're near the end of your career, maybe you're like, I can't do another change right now. So I think that's another part of the timing, is bringing people on board.
We went through this 6 years ago when Aaron completely revamped this to the science of reading. There were veteran teachers that were like, wait a minute, I do popcorn reading all the time. Things that literally hurt kids to do, right, in front of their peers. We changed that. When we changed that, it was to get the buy-in from those veteran teachers that never taught reading that way. And then once we did that to fidelity, the scores took off. Kids were actually able to take that information and transfer their learning, where before they weren't able to. Now we're doing that with math. But it's a huge shift.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time so much, as I'm sure everyone has today. I just want to change my hat for 1 second into a parent hat, because I have 2 different kids in 2 different buckets. So what would you say to parents to prepare, like for us to, in the next, I have a freshman and a 7th grader, for example. What would you say to them to say, hey, we should be looking for this, like, to kind of prepare for the next steps, because it is change and it is new and those are scary.
I think that the best advice is going to be related to not students being disrespectful, but students being able to voice their needs and what they need to learn and what their desires are a little bit more. Now, that might rub people the wrong way sometimes, but this plan does have a lot more student agency in it, in the sense of, could your child run their own parent-teacher conference? Like really examine themselves and where their strengths and weaknesses are. That's a skill that if kids can get that skill, they'll be very successful in this system. The ability to self-assess is huge, and being able to not be ashamed or embarrassed of where you need to improve. That accepting that, mistakes, when we say mistakes happen and lead to growth, but we've been in a system where a mistake has led to negative impact. So if we have younger kids coming up, I would, say that trying and not being perfect is okay. It generally leads to growth. And the idea of being willing to try things that make you feel a little uncomfortable, like you don't think that you'd ever want to do that. That at least putting some effort in to get out of your comfort zone. I think that would be helpful advice to anybody entering this system. Students with disabilities, you're still, this system was partially created for those students, right? So the idea that what does achievement look like? What does meeting your goals in your IEP look like? Is it over multiple classes? Is, the timing, the amount of time that you get services, all of those things will also be shifting.
I think like the old system prepared kids, and the final goal was getting to the stage. The new system is post-graduation. What are they prepared for? Where the old way was like the
Yeah, that's
factory
good.
model, and
That's a
it was
good way
like,
to put
your
it.
goal is to get up there. But then those kids, they'd walk out with their parents, drive home. What are they doing? Right.
Yeah.
Where now, what I don't care when they say our graduation rate. What I care about is, in 2 years, in 4 years, in 6 years, where's that kid? Did that kid, was he one that went to City BOCES? Are they working like the one I bumped into at Drivers Village making $100,000? He was BOCES kid, struggled in traditional school, found his niche, right? I care far more about that than the kids that just were handed the diploma, you know what I mean? And I think the new way is gonna prepare us.
Absolutely. The flexibility in itself, where we know each and every kid in that bucket.
Yeah.
That said, I love to go to BOCES as an 8th grader because
Correct.
I'm acting out and I'm being really bad in class, but I can weld something. Or I
Right.
can build a tree house really well. So I get that too, and I also have my 9th grader, we're already talking about all of these things, and she's like terrified of a test, but she can self-assess and have a conversation with you just like an adult, and is completely ready to be a secretary somewhere because she's that smart in that way.
Yeah, so I think that those things actually will be honored more for her class as a 9th grader. And the assessment options and things that she'll need to graduate are going to look a lot different than what any of us who attended a New York State school in the past, 50 years have had. And it starts with those current 10th graders and behind them.
Mentally prepped.
Yeah. And the information I shared with you today was shared on March 9th with every teacher and teaching assistant in the county in a presentation in which I was filmed, and it went out to everybody with a facilitator's guide, and people like Erin have asked that every time that there's an update that I get filmed and then it comes out to the whole region. And so they've established a YouTube channel, and whenever there's a major update, BOCES will be putting out the updates for anybody to see or hear about what the updates are. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I know that went a little longer than.
We asked 1,000 questions.
It's okay.
Yeah, welcome to this board.
No, it's fine.
We're tough, and you
It's
have
kind
the
of normal
pointer.
for me, but.
Thank you so
Yep,
much.
you're
It's-
welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, on to item E. Can I get a motion to accept item E in its entirety?
A motion?
Any discussion? All those in favor? On to item F, consent agenda. Could I get a motion for the consent agenda to be in its entirety? Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. G, on to reports. Student rep, did you get all that? We're going to give you a test now. I'm sure.
First, I'd like to congratulate the board on really showing our community love and really coming out for our 26 class and offering some sort of solution to our prom situation. I completely understand that safety is our #1 priority, and that even though we all truly wanted to have prom, that we can't be put in a situation like that where something could happen. And to see our community come out and give us all that food and the DJ and all the staff that came to support, it's definitely really upbringing to see everybody come together and have our 26 class have something. So I really appreciate it. I'd like to start on all of the events that BOCES has coming up regarding either student exams that are coming up to get their certifications and the celebrations. We have P-TECH OCC graduation coming up. We have the National Technical Honor Society induction ceremony coming up, the Nursing Assistant pinning ceremony, the P-TECH Senior Recognition, the Oswego County NHS induction, the Exception Ed End of the Year celebration, the CTE End of the Year ceremony, the CTE Advantage End of the Year ceremony, the Public Safety End of the Year ceremony, New Visions End of the Year ceremony, Bridges End of the Year ceremony, Care and End of the Year celebration, and CSMS Strive 8th grade moving up ceremony. So we congrats all of our fellow students and city BOCES that are excelling their education and going to begin starting their workforce. I'd also like to say that City BOCES did a military fair this past week, and it went super well. All of the students are really into it and exploring all of the different careers, especially if you're in cosmetology or in any sort of field that doesn't really involve military. It's nice to get that point of view and be able to go out and talk to people and have the opportunity to see a different window that you can have. And the military has so many benefits that it's able to show kids a new path. We had a Skills USA competition came up. All of our Central Square students really excelled in it and has really shown leadership, coming out and finding new ideas and creativity to be able to complete their activity, whatever the event was. We had a job fair at the high school. That went really well. All of the students really had some positive comments about it, and were really able to explore their different career paths and find opportunities to get connected with people that they couldn't be connected beforehand, especially with our younger students who are still exploring their careers. It was a nice outlook, being able to figure out what they need to do to be able to move on into whatever field that they are going into. We have the end of the year of sports, and we have events coming up. We have regencies. We had our advanced classes have their exams this week, so wish them all the best of luck on their results. I know that's really scary, and a lot of them are really nervous, but I wish them the best of luck on the results. We have the 5th grade leadership conference coming up. Really excited about that. We're really trying to involve our community and be able to show them a new way to be a leader and to be able to see that there's different parts in being a leader, whether it's community service or being able to just have a small part and a small say that can go a very long way. We have talent show coming up, which is super fun. We've had a lot of new people come out and wanting to do it, to help our community, see a new side that, is not just, drama club or, a lot of kids are coming out and really supporting this idea. And we had our blood drive, which went super, super well, and a lot of our staff members came out and really showed some love, and our community also donated a lot of food. I think that's all I have.
Excellent. That was a great one.
Thank you.
Yes, and I don't know how many more you're going to do, but I just want to compliment you on, I remember your first time doing that, and now, and your growth is just spectacular.
Great job.
Great job.
And you volunteer all over the place. I just want to thank you for your time. Track meets. She's doing her own path with nursing, and also her resume was really good. I did her senior interview, so I'm just so proud of you.
And you had an opportunity to be like a model student for BOCES, right? To really show that's an amazing pathway to be on. So I'm glad whenever you have the opportunity, you're always incorporating that as well. And I think that's wonderful.
Okay, so thank you. Board members report. I'll open up the floor to what folks want to say, and then I'll maybe wrap it up with what I did last week. Anybody would like to speak?
I assume Tom's going to speak about Saturday, so I'm not going to waste the public's time speaking about it.
I just wanted to make one quick comment for the middle school, credit for what they were able to put on with the school musical. I was there Friday and Saturday, standing room only, and staff jumped right in and made room for everybody to be able to enjoy the show, and seeing the staff there supporting the kids went very well with everything happening in the community. So kudos to that school.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I heard that too, so I hope that's in the works for the future.
I had, last week I met with Mr. Weatherup and Jay Martino to talk about the SPOs and have them, it was a fine meeting. They said hard no about funding it through the county, but, yeah, it's a big surprise. But what they charge, I just want to say to Tom, I said, we get it at a much better rate, a more reasonable rate going through Central Square than what the county charges. They're about $25,000 to $30,000 more per SPO. So, when the numbers that they charge, and then if, when I was talking to them about it, the overall total cost that it would be to the county would be a lot of money. I think still well-deserving. Public safety should be at the county level. I expressed that to them, but they just weren't really buying it. But it was a good meeting. It was nice. I've never been to the county exec's office up in Oswego, but it was a good meeting and well represented to talk to two alums, from Central Square. They understood it, but they just didn't have the money. So
they said that it was like a funding issue and not something that they just don't think that they could sell, or?
yeah, it would, because he goes, do you realize what my jeopardy would be is if I said, well, we're going to pay for Central Square, but we're not going to pay for Pulaski and Fulton, and it was funny because the mayor of Fulton was right after me talking about their shortfall and their budget and all it is. He goes, you're coming with a small request, Steve. Your next one up is going to be pretty big. So, I mean, I get their position. Not that I agree with it, but that's just me. But
Not for nothing. There's one common aspect in all of these budgetary crises that are happening, and it's what the state's giving us. What the state's giving the county, what the state's giving the school districts. They don't have the money to pay for the SPOs, and we will find the money to pay for the SPOs, but we don't have the money to pay for other things because of that. So, whoever's got to make the cuts to make the payments, the commonality among all of this is the amount of funding that's coming from the state and where the money's going.
yeah, he said that his budget, 65% of his budget is state mandated. They have to do it.
Who said that?
Whether, yeah, that 65% of their budget is mandated by the state. So they're really, what they have left over is just not.
Well, it's like what we're dealing with, 75%.
Well, and that's exactly the point, is that the state tells you how much money they're gonna give you, and they tell you most of what you have to accomplish with it, which usually eats all of it. And then there's all these other things that everybody wants or really should be mandated or needed, but, and we have to find where within that area we can make cuts to pay for the things that are mandated, while also providing all the other opportunities. And, again, it's this is the commonality. I'm going to tell you what you have to do, and I'm going to tell you how much money you have to do it with. That's it, and there's no other way. I also have a business. If I have a business and I know I need to do X, Y, and Z, and it's going to cost, this much money, I find another way to get the money. We can't do that. We have two sources, really, in the grand scheme of things. Taxpayers, which the state tells us what we can do there, and how much money the state's going to give us, which they also like to tell us exactly what they're going to do there. So, there's no other outlet to find it. And so, unfortunately, we're all in the same boat, and, he doesn't have the money, and I hear that. We also, obviously, again, we're finding the money for the SPOs, but that takes it away from something else. So, at the end of the day, we need more money.
Correct. But it was a big, swing and a miss on that part, so I just thought I'd let everybody know that I did go up. I did meet with them, and,
Yeah. Take them to hear you.
yep.
And it's at least good for them, when they're doing what we hope they do and they're advocating
Right.
actively, that, the kids are suffering because you're not giving enough money, we don't have enough to give them. And at the end of the day, right, no matter what we cut, no matter what we do, it falls back on some missed opportunity that these kids can have because people refuse.
But there is one critical difference between the county and us. The county doesn't have to have the taxpayers approve what their tax rates are going to be. So,
I can slide that right into mine now, ready?
Yep, I'm ready. Yes.
So I was actually going to say this part last, but one of the things we're going to be talking about in executive session, because has to do with negotiations, which does require there, is the SBOs. So it was brought to our attention, and none of the SBOs have said to me, hey, I want this much more money or anything like that. They're stand-up people. The whole thing that came out that we were the first to have special patrol officers at the beginning of all these school shootings starting about 9 years ago was that a school resource officer is a police officer that's not retired. And to get one of those in a school was $250,000 for each one. So when I was over at ESM as an elementary principal, they did contract through Manlius to be able to, or not Manlius, Syracuse, East Syracuse, one of the agencies, the police agencies, where it was $250,000 because they were still working. So the district was responsible for their health benefits, the whole 9 yards. Where it was very feasible for us to be able to hire a special patrol officer who had to be a retired police officer and start them with, pay them $45,000. And we weren't responsible for any of their health benefits because they were retired. They were already getting that from the state. So we were able to get 3. Then we had pandemic money, and we were like, you know what? We can afford to have 1 in each building, 6. And then more school shootings. What you just saw recently with Clinton Middle School, where thank God that father overheard his daughter late at night on the phone and saying that, what? They're saying there's going to be a school shooting? And he reported that. So I bring this up because now ours are at 45,000 to start, so 3 of them are up to 50,000. The county sheriff's department funds the SBO program for all of the school districts that don't have a village police that you need to be able to have what we have, where they're certified with their guns and all of their requirements. And they're starting them at 65,000. So you can say, hey, people love Central Square. I think that was just evident on Saturday. They loved being a part of that. The SPOs were calling me. What a great community. With that being said, when everyone has bills and rising costs of everything, there's a huge difference between 45,000 and 65,000, right? Even if it is their second career after retirement, that's still a huge discrepancy. So we're looking now at what we can do, knowing that we've got to make more of a compensation so we don't lose another one. to be able to go and work closer to home, but also make considerably more. But you hit the nail on the head. People can vote on our budget, they don't vote on the other ones. At the end of the day, things are also gonna have to get reduced or cut. So we have our priorities, and we know school safety is paramount. No one questions that. If we removed an SPO from one building, there's no way that I or any of the board can ever say that we weren't reducing safety and security, because we would be. The person wouldn't be there. And all the research shows, and that if that horrible day ever happened, literally, it's down to the minute of saving lives. So if that person could put that risk down, that just saves student lives and staff lives. So we know that can't be. But that also goes in there with the counselors and the social workers of what they're doing. Because in a perfect world, the parents would utilize those resources outside of school. But we don't live in a perfect world, and we have more and more grandparents trying to raise their kids, and all of these issues are happening. And we have an amazing counseling support team here at school that deal with such high-level needs, where kids are literally, it seems like daily, being rushed to CPEP at St. Joseph Hospital because they're legitimately, after a whole survey, showing that they're at risk of killing themselves. That's huge. So, to your point, there are things that we will have to reduce to stay competitive in those priority areas. That's one of the things that we will be talking about. But, shifting to something a little bit more upbeat and happier, the following spring scholar athlete varsity teams in 2026, and for anybody in the audience that isn't familiar with the qualifications for a scholar athlete team, that means that over 75% of the team has over a 90 average. We have some pretty large teams, so that's impressive. I will say I don't know any other district or high school in the region that has had as many scholar athlete teams as we have. Baseball, boys and girls track and field, boys tennis, flag football, girls golf, girls lacrosse, and softball all had the scholar athlete recognition, team recognition, which is amazing. And that's a testament not only to those parents that say you need to learn responsibilities, whether it's a band parent or sports parent. It's interesting, our band parents, those kids, the average is like a 97 GPA. So how they do that in practice 60 hours a week in band is pretty remarkable. So there's that. The next, Oswego County Athlete of the Week was Emily Michaels, varsity flag football team. That was pretty cool. She was showcased, she was interviewed, she was so articulate, talking about how she started with softball and then this became a sport and it's really flourishing. Love seeing her out there on the news. In collaboration with MJ Quenneville, HME social worker, and Saving Face barber. Do you guys have these pictures in front of you of these kids with their haircuts? No. And 2 local hairstylists, they provided free haircuts for 17 MHE students.
That's awesome.
And as you can see, these kids, yeah, there you go. Scroll it down a little bit. The one little guy loves his mohawk. No, go up.
I have an opposite
Right
mohawk.
there on the top right.
Oh, I see him.
Yeah, he was love showing me that. And Steve wanted to know he has an opposite mohawk. He
I have
gets
an
a
opposite,
discount.
yeah, good discount.
Students had a snack, worked on homework, and played games with our teachers who volunteered to stay after for this, while they waited for their turn. It was an awesome event, and they are hoping to provide it a few more times throughout the school year. MJ is phenomenal, one of our social workers. We always talk about Joe Moskell. We also have other social workers that do a tremendous job. One other quick thing. 2 things. I want to talk about what happened on Saturday, but Unified Basketball, I'm just blown away how many community members and students and former students come back to watch Unified Basketball. If you're not familiar with that, it's a team that has special education students that have serious impairments, disabilities, that are partnered with just general education students. And I gotta tell you, my hats off to these students. Preston Lacey was a perfect example. Just watching him and some of our other gen ed students really kind of take these special education students under their wing. It brings tears to everybody in the audience, and it's not about us, like the last one was us versus Oswego. the kids on both sides don't care about who's on what team. It's so fun, and for those parents that have the high needs special education children, to see them being able to compete is what every parent should be able to have, regardless of what their children are going through. So those unified games are great. There's another one coming up, I believe on Friday or what day is it this week? Wednesday. It's Wednesday. Perfect. Senior ball. So I just want to give a quick, just real quick, synopsis of what happened. I had sent an email out to staff, but parents probably don't know that this was brought on my radar at like 9 o'clock in the morning because I have a nephew who's a police officer in SPD. He's the same nephew that was Michael Jensen's partner on that day in April 14, 2024. If the whack job guy came to the other side of the car, my nephew would have been the one that was killed. He went to the front of the car and shot my nephew's partner, Mike Jensen, who has been at my parents' house more times than ever when he was alive to get Sunday dinner with the Colabufo. Just a great person. So the reason why I was aware of this is I found out from my police friends that 2 officers were shot, but it wasn't Jimmy. And so I was able to quickly call my sister and my mother, who would go into panic mode knowing that he was working down there. And so that's when I found out, and then I got a call from the police chief, and he kind of put it in my mind because, yes, I realized that senior ball was that night, but I didn't even connect the dots yet that it was at the On Center a block away. I live by like a 2-hour saying, get to the On Center. Like, that's how I operate, especially on the weekend with so many other balls in the air. So I was able to find out it wasn't him, but then it was like this guy had barricaded himself, shooting a shotgun out the window. It got to the point where I was talking with Ryan McMahon on the phone. Kudos to him for calling me up, knowing that
Okay, and I'll just add that there's no two people that can push stuff harder than Christy and Casey. You guys are unrelenting, I'm telling you. It was unbelievable. What an event. So proud. Could I get a motion for item H in its entirety? Any discussion? All those in favor? I will make a motion that the Central Square School District Board of Education hereby move into executive session to discuss matters leading up to the tenure of one particular person and the hiring of a special patrol officer and salary with no action to follow. Those are solid words for that table over there, I'm sure.
I'll second.
Any discussion?